In the heart of a quiet suburban home, a typical night is shattered when Hannah is struck by excruciating abdominal pain, leading to a frantic rush to the hospital. What begins as a seemingly straightforward appendicitis emergency spirals into a deeply troubling revelation when, after surgery, Hannah's persistent nausea and fatigue unveil a shocking secret. She is pregnant. The discovery ignites a storm of emotions within her family, transforming their once stable lives into a tumult of confusion, anger, and fear. As Hannah's mother, Sandra, grapples with the heart-wrenching reality, she isolates her daughter, fueling a growing chasm between them. Tensions rise, and with mounting pressures from school and family expectations, Hannah's situation becomes increasingly dire. In a moment of overwhelming despair, Hannah's fragile resolve leads her to a dark place, only to be rescued by a desperate intervention from her parents. Through the chaos and heartache, a glimmer of hope emerges as Hannah's family comes together, facing their trials with newfound resolve and unity. The journey of healing begins with raw honesty, unconditional support, and the promise of unwavering love as they navigate the uncertain road ahead. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Before we dive into this story, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hannah was racked with excruciating pain, her body curling into a tight, trembling ball as waves of searing agony surged through her abdomen. Each breath she gasped for felt like a dagger twisting mercilessly inside her, amplifying the torment with every inhale. The pain was unrelenting and piercing, gnawing away at her sanity and overshadowing every other thought. The once familiar glow of her bedroom lights seemed to blend into a hazy blur as tears welled up, blurring her vision with their salty sting. "Mom! Mom! It hurts so badly!" she cried out, her voice a desperate, anguished roar. Her mother, Sandra, burst through the door, her face ashen and etched with alarm. "Hannah, what's happening?" Sandra's voice was fraught with urgency as she rushed to her daughter's side. The sight of Hannah's contorted expression and trembling, pallid hands sent a jolt of fear through Sandra's heart. "We need to get you to the hospital immediately," Sandra declared, her voice trembling with panic as she scrambled to grab her phone and dial for an ambulance. The emergency response was swift, and within moments, doctors were bustling around Hannah, diagnosing her with acute appendicitis. The surgical team acted with precision and speed, and as the anesthesia took hold, Hannah felt the relentless pain gradually dissolve into a state of blissful numbness. When Hannah's eyes fluttered open, she was greeted by the stark, clinical whiteness of the hospital room's ceiling. For a disorienting moment, she felt unmoored, her mind struggling to piece together the fragments of what had transpired. As her hand tentatively traced the contours of her abdomen, feeling the reassuring weight of bandages beneath her hospital gown, the once intense pain had dulled to a faint, echoing memory. Sandra was perched anxiously beside her bed, her face etched with lines of deep concern. "You're awake," she said, her voice laden with palpable relief. "The surgery went well, sweetheart. The doctor assured me that you're going to be all right." Hannah managed a nod, too drained to muster the energy for a response. She longed for the solace of sleep, to escape the lingering shadows of pain and fear. Yet, an unsettling discomfort settled in her stomach, a disquieting sense she couldn't quite define. She closed her eyes, hoping it was merely a residual effect of the surgery. As days stretched on, Hannah was finally discharged from the hospital. However, the nagging unease in her stomach refused to dissipate. In fact, it seemed to intensify. She felt perpetually fatigued, her body weighed down and sluggish, while waves of nausea crashed over her, particularly in the mornings. The thought of eating became a grim chore as her once favorite foods now repulsed her. Sandra, ever observant, noted the stark changes in her daughter almost immediately. "You're barely eating, Hannah. What's going on?" she asked one morning, her voice a mixture of anxiety and frustration. "You need to regain your strength after the surgery." "I'm just not hungry," Hannah replied with a defeated shrug, pushing her plate away. The sight and smell of the eggs and bacon churned her stomach. She was baffled, unable to reconcile the fact that the surgery, intended to alleviate her suffering, seemed to have worsened her condition. One evening, after another wave of nausea had Hannah racing to the bathroom, Sandra's patience frayed. "This isn't right, Hannah," she said, her tone sharp and laced with concern. "We're seeing the doctor again tomorrow." But it wasn't the doctor who brought clarity. Driven by an unyielding maternal instinct and a gnawing worry, Sandra stopped by a pharmacy on their way back from an errand to purchase a pregnancy test. She handed it to Hannah that night, her expression inscrutable. "Just take this," she instructed firmly. Hannah stared at the small, unassuming box, disbelief and dread washing over her. "Mom, this is absurd. I'm not. This can't be right," she stammered, feeling a cold sweat bead on her brow. "Just take it," Sandra repeated, her gaze steely. "For my peace of mind." The next morning, the bathroom was enveloped in an eerie silence, broken only by Hannah's labored breathing as she sat on the edge of the tub, staring at the test in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines, positive. The world seemed to spin out of control as she struggled to grasp the enormity of what she was seeing. This couldn't be happening. It defied belief. "Mom!" she called out, her voice barely more than a whisper. Sandra entered with a stern expression, but upon seeing the look of utter shock on Hannah's face, her expression softened momentarily. "What does it say?" she asked, her voice tight with anxiety. Hannah handed over the test, her hands shaking uncontrollably. "It's positive," she whispered, feeling as though the walls of her world were closing in around her. Sandra's face lost all color as she stared at the pregnancy test results, her expression shifting from disbelief to a simmering fury. Her eyes darted between the test and Hannah's tear-streaked, pale face, searching for some semblance of an explanation. For a tense moment, the silence was deafening, until the anger finally erupted. "How could you let this happen?" she demanded, her voice rising in a mixture of rage and hurt. "What were you thinking?" "I didn't, Mom. I swear. I didn't do anything." Hannah's voice cracked with desperation as tears streamed uncontrollably down her face. "I don't understand how this happened. I haven't. Don't lie to me, Hannah." Sandra's voice trembled with a mix of fury and disbelief. "Do you think I'm naive? Do you think I don't know what's been going on?" Hannah's heart raced, her chest tightening with a blend of fear, confusion, and sheer panic. "I'm not lying, Mom. I swear I haven't done anything. I don't know how this happened," she pleaded, her voice breaking as sobs overtook her. She was overwhelmed, her body shaking violently with the force of her emotions. Sandra's gaze was a tumultuous storm of anger and skepticism. "How can you be pregnant if you haven't done anything?" she demanded coldly, her words sharp and accusatory. "How am I supposed to believe that?" "I don't know," Hannah cried out, her voice raw with distress. "I don't know how this happened. Please, Mom, you have to believe me." For a moment, Sandra's anger gave way to a chilling, icy resolve. She stood there, watching her daughter's raw, uncontrollable sobs with a hard, unreadable expression. "We're not telling your father," she said finally, her voice devoid of emotion. "Not until we have a clearer understanding of what's going on." Hannah looked up, her eyes swollen and red from crying. "What? Why not?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, laden with confusion and hurt. "You know how your father is," Sandra replied firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. "He'll never believe this. He'll place the blame squarely on you, and I'm not going to let that happen. We need to figure this out ourselves first. We keep this between us for now. Do you understand?" Hannah nodded numbly, her mind too overwhelmed to argue. "Okay," she whispered, wiping her tears away, but a cold sense of dread settled in her stomach. She had no idea how they would manage to explain this or what the future held for her. All she could grasp was the horrifying reality that her life, as she knew it, had irrevocably changed. Sandra turned to leave the bathroom, pausing at the door without looking back. "You'll stay in your room tonight," she said curtly. "I'll bring you some dinner." "Mom, please," Hannah started to plead, but Sandra cut her off abruptly. "Don't, Hannah," Sandra said, her voice chillingly cold. "Just don't." With that, she left the room, leaving Hannah alone with her swirling fears, relentless tears, and the crushing weight of the unknown. As Hannah lay in bed, the room was cloaked in darkness, with only a faint sliver of moonlight sneaking through the curtains. The house was eerily silent, amplifying the oppressive weight of her thoughts. The events of the day replayed in her mind like a haunting, broken record. The visceral fear, the gut-wrenching confusion, the searing anger in her mother's eyes. She curled into herself, pressing her hands against her still flat stomach as if willing the impossible truth to disappear. Sleep eluded her. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of those two pink lines reappeared, a constant, painful reminder that her life had irrevocably changed. The nausea that she had once attributed to the flu or the aftermath of surgery now had a far more sinister explanation. It felt as though her own body had betrayed her most unimaginably. The days that followed became a blur of relentless nausea, deep-seated fear, and the oppressive silence that had descended like a suffocating fog between Hannah and her mother. Each morning, Hannah was gripped by waves of nausea, leaving her weak and trembling. The bitterness of despair tainted each retch, a stark reminder of the secret gnawing at her insides. The once vibrant and lively girl had become a mere shadow of herself, her energy sapped, and her mind plagued by an ever-present anxiety that denied her rest. Sandra, though emotionally distant, couldn't ignore the toll this was taking on her daughter. The pallor of Hannah's skin, the dark shadows beneath her once bright eyes. She observed the way Hannah's hands trembled as she tried to eat, her appetite vanishing completely. This compelled Sandra to act decisively. "We're going to the clinic," she announced one afternoon, her tone leaving no room for dissent. "We need to understand what's happening." Exhausted and emotionally drained, Hannah simply nodded, feeling detached and disoriented, as if she were moving through a dense fog, disconnected from reality. The drive to the clinic was shrouded in silence, the tension so palpable it felt suffocating. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 1 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. At the clinic, the nurse was brisk and professional, though Hannah caught a glimpse of pity in her eyes as she handed the results to Sandra. "It's positive," she confirmed quietly, solidifying the truth they both dreaded. Sandra's lips were pressed into a tight line, her knuckles white as she clutched the test results. She didn't look at Hannah as they left the clinic, and the drive home was enveloped in a profound, uneasy silence. It was more than just awkward. It was an expanding chasm, a widening gulf that neither mother nor daughter knew how to bridge. As the days blurred into weeks, the nausea became a constant, unwelcome companion for Hannah. Each morning, she woke up feeling as though her world was spiraling out of control. Her body was weak and drained, and her once steady school performance faltered. Her father's disappointment was palpable. He was a man of strict expectations, always demanding excellence, and the drop in her grades was like a personal affront to him. "Hannah, you need to get your act together," he said one evening, his voice heavy with disapproval as he looked at her latest report card. "Your grades are slipping, and I won't tolerate this kind of behavior. You know how important your education is." Hannah sat in silence, her gaze fixed on the floor. The weight of his scrutiny felt like a heavy stone pressing down on her. "I don't understand what's gotten into you lately," he continued, his tone growing harsher. "You used to be so focused, so driven. Now look at you. What's happened?" The urge to scream and reveal everything was overwhelming, but the words were trapped in her throat, choked by fear and shame. She knew he wouldn't believe her or understand. He would only blame her, just as her mother had. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll do better." "You'd better," he replied curtly, his frustration evident as he turned away from her. "I expect to see improvement by the next report card. No more excuses." Isolation became Hannah's new reality. Sandra's coldness grew sharper after the pregnancy test confirmed Hannah's worst fears. There were no more comforting words or gentle touches from her mother. It was as if Hannah had become a source of shame, something to be hidden away. Sandra's once warm presence turned into a distant, icy wall, leaving Hannah to face her terror alone. The pressure, school, the baby, her mother's rejection, and her father's relentless demands was overwhelming. Dark thoughts began to creep into her mind, growing louder and more insistent. How much easier would it be to escape the relentless tide of fear and guilt? One night, after another unbearable day, Hannah found herself staring at a bottle of pills her mother had left out after a recent checkup. The idea was almost comforting, the prospect of drifting off to sleep and never waking up to this nightmare. Her fingers brushed the cold glass of the bottle, the decision hanging in the balance. But then she hesitated. The baby. Her hand trembled as she thought about the life growing inside her, innocent and unaware. Could she do that to her child? The fear of what awaited her battled with the instinct to protect the small, fragile life within. In the end, the fear won. Hannah couldn't bring herself to do it. Not yet. But as the days wore on and the burden of her secret became nearly unbearable, her resolve began to weaken. Each day was a struggle to maintain any semblance of normalcy, and each night, she lay awake, haunted by thoughts she could barely control. The sickness was unrelenting, the pressure at school was suffocating, and Sandra's silence was more painful than any words could have been. It felt as though she was suffocating, trapped in a reality that offered no escape. Her father's constant criticism became unbearable. "Hannah, what's wrong with you?" he would demand, his voice cold and accusing. "You're letting everything fall apart. You're smarter than this. I expect better." Those words echoed relentlessly in her mind as she sat in her room one evening, staring out at the darkening sky. The bottle of pills was in her hand again, the temptation stronger now, the fear more distant. Maybe it was better this way. Maybe it was the only way. It was Sandra who found her first. In a rare moment of concern breaking through her icy facade, she went to check on Hannah, and what she saw froze her blood. Hannah lay on the floor, the empty bottle beside her, her face pale and her breath shallow. "No, no, no," Sandra screamed, falling to her knees beside her daughter, shaking her desperately. "Hannah, please. Hannah." Hannah's father, usually so composed, was frantic as he dialed the emergency number, his hands shaking uncontrollably. As they waited for the ambulance, Sandra held Hannah close, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry," she whispered, rocking back and forth with her daughter in her arms. When the paramedics arrived, they rushed Hannah to the hospital, but the damage had been done. Sandra couldn't stop blaming herself, the guilt gnawing at her insides. "This is my fault," she repeated over and over in the waiting room. "I pushed her too hard. I should have listened to her." Hannah's father, usually stern and unyielding, crumbled beside her. He wrapped his arms around his wife, holding her tightly as they both wept. "We'll get through this," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "We'll make it right somehow. We'll be there for her." The paramedics worked quickly, checking Hannah's vitals and administering what they could to counteract the overdose. Sandra hovered nearby, her heart pounding, her mind a chaotic storm of terror and regret. "Please, please don't take her from me," she pleaded silently. Overwhelmed by the situation, Sandra finally confessed the truth to her husband. "She's pregnant," Sandra whispered through her tears, barely able to meet his eyes. "I found out a few weeks ago. I didn't know what to do. I thought we could handle it, that she would be okay. But I was wrong." Hannah's father stared at her, his face losing all color as the gravity of the situation set in. For a moment, he was paralyzed, unable to speak or move. The revelation hit him like a tidal wave, crashing down with overwhelming force. "Pregnant," he finally whispered, his voice trembling with disbelief. "How?" Sandra's tears flowed freely as she buried her face in her hands. "I don't know," she sobbed. "She swears she didn't. You know, I didn't believe her at first, but now I just don't know what to think." He took a deep, shuddering breath, feeling nausea wash over him. But seeing his wife's despair, he pushed his shock aside. Gently, he pulled her closer, pressing his lips to her forehead. "We'll figure this out," he murmured, his voice filled with resolve. "We'll get through this. Promise. We'll help her no matter what." When Hannah finally opened her eyes, the world around her was a hazy blur. The beeping of the machines felt distant and faint, and her body ached with every movement. Her mind was clouded with confusion and despair. But then, she felt a comforting warmth, a hand clasping hers, and she turned her head to see her parents beside her. Sandra's face was streaked with tears, her usual composure shattered. Hannah had never seen her mother so vulnerable, so broken. Her father, typically the rock of their family, now looked fragile. His eyes rimmed with red as he gripped Hannah's other hand. "Hannah, baby, we're here," Sandra whispered, her voice trembling. "You're going to be okay. We're going to get through this together." Tears welled up in Hannah's eyes, her chest tightening with a mix of relief and sorrow. "I'm sorry," she croaked, her voice barely audible. I didn't know what to do. I was so scared, so alone." Her father's grip tightened, his voice thick with emotion. "You're not alone, Hannah. We're here. We're not going to let you go through this by yourself." "I'm sorry too," he continued, his voice breaking. "I've been hard on you. Too hard. But that's going to change. I promise you." Sandra leaned in, pressing a tender kiss to Hannah's forehead, her tears mingling with her daughter's. "We love you, Hannah. We'll do whatever it takes to help you through this. We're facing this together." The three of them sat there, holding on to each other, the weight of their shared grief and guilt palpable in the room. Yet, there was also a newfound sense of resolve, a determination to face whatever challenges lay ahead as a united family. As the day began to darken, a young nurse approached Hannah's room quietly, her expression a mixture of guilt and concern. She glanced nervously over her shoulder as if making sure no one was watching. Knocking lightly before entering, she spoke in a hushed voice. "Hi, Hannah. I'm not supposed to be here, but I need to tell you something." Hannah's parents exchanged wary glances. "What is it?" Sandra asked, her voice edged with suspicion. The nurse took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "During your appendectomy, Dr. Roberts did something to you. I overheard him talking about some kind of experiment. He's done this to other patients too, but it never worked before until you." Hannah's father's face darkened with anger. "What exactly did he do?" he demanded, his voice dangerously low. "I don't know all the details," the nurse admitted, her voice shaking. "But I know he altered something. I'm so sorry. I should have said something sooner, but I was scared. He's very powerful here." Sandra's face paled as the nurse's words sunk in. "We need to report this," she said, her voice trembling with resolve. "We need to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Hannah's father nodded grimly. "We will. We're not letting him get away with this." The determination in his voice was palpable, and the family braced themselves for the fight ahead, united in their resolve to seek justice and protect their daughter. The nurse's warning echoed in their minds as she left, her anxiety palpable. Relief flickered across her face, but it was clear she was still frightened. The family, now alone, was enveloped in a heavy silence. They understood one crucial thing. They couldn't rest until Dr. Roberts faced the consequences of his actions. The battle had only just begun, and they were resolved to fight it together. The next day, with steely determination, Hannah and her parents prepared to confront Dr. Roberts. They arranged a private meeting at the hospital, determined to address the situation in a controlled environment. The sterile, impersonal room felt like a pressure cooker, the hum of the fluorescent lights adding to the mounting tension. Dr. Roberts entered with his usual calm demeanor, seemingly oblivious to the gravity of the situation. "I was informed you wanted to speak with me," he said, his tone polite but detached. Hannah's father didn't waste a second. "We know what you did," he declared, his voice low and seething with restrained anger. "The nurse told us everything." For a fleeting moment, something flickered across Dr. Roberts's face, surprise or perhaps irritation, but it vanished quickly. "I see," he said slowly, carefully choosing his words. And what exactly did she tell you? Sandra, her voice trembling with anger, stepped in. She said you experimented on our daughter, that you did something during her surgery, something that resulted in her getting pregnant. Dr. Roberts sighed, as though dealing with a minor inconvenience. I suppose there's no use denying it, he said with a dismissive air. Yes, I conducted an experimental procedure during Hannah's appendectomy. It was a calculated risk, but one I deemed necessary for the advancement of medical science. Hannah's father's fists clenched tightly. You had no right to do that, he said, his voice shaking with fury. You violated our trust. You violated her. Dr. Roberts looked at them with mild annoyance. I believed the potential benefits outweighed the risks, he replied coolly. As I mentioned, this procedure had never worked before. Hannah's case is unique and, frankly, quite fascinating. Fascinating? Sandra's voice rose in disbelief. You ruined her life, and you think this is fascinating? Ruined her life? Dr. Roberts repeated, almost amused. On the contrary, I've allowed her to be part of something groundbreaking. This is a success story, not a tragedy. Hannah's emotions spilled over. You've turned my life into a nightmare, she said, her voice trembling. You had no right to do this to me. I didn't ask for this, and I don't want it. Dr. Roberts shrugged nonchalantly as if her words were irrelevant. Science requires sacrifices, he said flatly. You should consider yourself fortunate to be part of something so revolutionary. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 2 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Sandra's patience snapped. We're going to the authorities, she said, her voice steady and resolute. You're going to pay for what you've done. Dr. Roberts's expression remained unchanged. You're welcome to try, he replied evenly. But I should warn you, these kinds of accusations are difficult to prove, and the burden of proof lies with you, not me. With that, he turned and exited the room, leaving the family in stunned silence. The enormity of their challenge began to sink in, but they were resolved not to back down. The drive home was silent, the tension thick in the air. Each family member was absorbed in their thoughts, grappling with the enormity of what had just transpired. Hannah stared out the window, the horror of Dr. Roberts's cold admission echoing in her mind. Her parents, seated in the front, exchanged worried glances but remained silent. The weight of the truth was heavy on them all. Back at home, they gathered in the living room, the atmosphere still charged with unresolved tension. It was Sandra who broke the silence, her voice barely a whisper. We need to talk about what happens next, she said, her gaze locked on Hannah. This pregnancy, we have to decide what to do. Hannah's stomach tightened at her mother's words. She had anticipated this conversation, but that didn't make it any easier. Wrapping her arms around herself, she tried to stave off the cold fear that seemed to seep into her very bones. The uncertainty of their path forward felt overwhelming, and the weight of their choices lay heavy on her heart. The nurse took a deep breath, her resolve evident despite the fear in her eyes. We need to gather evidence, she began, her voice steady but urgent. There are records, testimonies, and possibly internal communications that could reveal the extent of Dr. Roberts's misconduct. If we can compile enough concrete proof, we might be able to bring him to justice. Sandra's eyes widened with both hope and apprehension. But how can we access those records? And what if he finds out? He could retaliate, not just against us, but against anyone who helps us. The nurse nodded, understanding their concerns. We need to be very careful. I can start by reaching out to a few trusted colleagues who have been quietly dissatisfied with the way things are handled at the hospital. They might have more information or be able to help us gather evidence. We'll need to proceed discreetly and strategically. Once we have enough evidence, we can consult with legal experts who specialize in medical malpractice. Hannah's father, usually the stoic pillar of strength, looked at the nurse with a mix of gratitude and determination. We need to do this. We can't let Dr. Roberts get away with what he's done. Hannah deserves justice and a chance to reclaim her life. Hannah, though exhausted and overwhelmed, felt a glimmer of hope. "I want to fight back," she said, her voice wavering but resolute. "I don't want this to define my life. I want to make sure he's held accountable for his actions." The nurse handed Sandra a small envelope. "Inside are the names and contact details of some people who might be able to assist us. Reach out to them as soon as possible. And remember, others in the hospital feel as we do but are afraid to come forward. We need to build a network of support." With renewed determination, the family watched as the nurse left, her steps echoing in the hallway. The weight of their situation was still heavy, but they now had a plan, and with it, a spark of hope. They knew the road ahead would be difficult and fraught with challenges, but they were ready to face it together. In the days that followed, the family embarked on their quest for justice. They reached out to the contacts provided by the nurse, slowly building a network of allies. Some were willing to share their own experiences with Dr. Roberts, while others guided how to navigate the complex legal landscape. As the investigation progressed, they encountered numerous obstacles. The hospital's bureaucracy was labyrinthine, and many of their contacts were hesitant to speak out due to fear of retaliation. The family found themselves navigating a treacherous path, balancing their need for information with the very real threat of Dr. Roberts' power and influence. Hannah continued to face judgment and whispers at school. The stares and snickers from her peers were almost unbearable, but she found solace in the support of a few friends who stood by her. Despite the growing pressure, she remained focused on the goal of seeking justice. The baby inside her became a source of strength and resolve, even as the challenges of her pregnancy took a toll on her physical and emotional well-being. Sandra and Hannah's father were torn between their concern for Hannah's future and their desire to protect her from further harm. They worried about what people would say, how it would reflect on their family, and the immense strain this situation was placing on their daughter. Conversations at home were strained, filled with unspoken fears and uncertainties. They all knew they were on the brink of something monumental, but none of them knew exactly how to navigate it. One day, a knock at the door broke the uneasy silence in the house. Sandra opened it to find one of the nurses from the hospital standing there. Her expression was nervous but resolute. "Mrs. Mitchell," the nurse said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "I'm sorry to come unannounced, but I need to speak with you and your family." Sandra hesitated but then stepped aside to let the nurse in. Once seated in the living room, the nurse wasted no time getting to the point. "I want to help," she said firmly. "I've been thinking about what Dr. Roberts did, and it's not right. It's not ethical. I've spoken to some of the other nurses, and they feel the same way. We want to stand up against him, but we're scared. He's powerful and has connections that could ruin us." Hannah's father leaned forward, his expression intense and determined. "What can we do? How can we stop him?" The nurse took a deep breath, her eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation. "We need to gather as much evidence as possible. This means getting access to hospital records, speaking with more employees who may have witnessed or suspected misconduct, and compiling any related communications. If we can build a comprehensive case, we can approach legal experts who specialize in medical malpractice and whistleblower cases." Sandra's eyes filled with tears, but she kept her voice steady. "We have to be careful, though," she said. "What if he retaliates? What if the hospital tries to cover up what happened?" The nurse nodded. "Those are valid concerns. We need to take every precaution. I can connect you with legal experts who can help protect us and advise us on how to proceed. Additionally, we should document everything meticulously and avoid discussing the case with anyone outside our trusted circle." As the nurse prepared to leave, she handed Sandra the envelope. "Inside are the names of legal experts and some sympathetic hospital staff who can assist us. Contact them as soon as possible. We need to move quickly, but carefully." With a renewed sense of purpose, the family watched as the nurse left. The weight of their situation remained, but now they had a clearer path forward and a network of support. They knew the journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but they were committed to seeing it through. Over the following weeks, the family worked tirelessly. Sandra and Hannah's father reached out to the contacts provided by the nurse, setting up meetings with legal experts and gathering evidence. They encountered numerous setbacks, discrepancies in records, reluctant witnesses, and the constant threat of Dr. Roberts' influence. But with each small victory, they grew more determined. Hannah continued to face the challenges of her pregnancy and the judgment of her peers. The decision to drop out of school was one of the hardest she had ever made, but it was necessary for her mental health and well-being. She focused on her health and preparing for the arrival of her baby, finding moments of solace in the support of her family and the occasional show of solidarity from friends. One evening, as the family sat together in the living room, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Sandra looked at Hannah, her eyes filled with a mix of pride and concern. "We've made progress," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We have a preliminary case against Dr. Roberts. It's not enough to take him down yet, but it's a start." Hannah's father nodded, his expression one of cautious optimism. "We need to keep pushing forward. We're making a difference and we can't give up now." Hannah, her hand resting on her growing belly, felt a surge of resolve. "I'm ready to see this through," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "I know it's going to be hard, but I want to fight for what's right." As they prepared for the next steps, the family knew they faced an uphill battle. But with their unwavering support for each other and the determination to seek justice, they felt a renewed sense of strength. The road ahead was uncertain, but together, they would confront the challenges and fight for the future they all deserved. Dr. Roberts' words hung heavy in the air, a chilling reminder of the power and influence he wielded. The family was visibly shaken, each member grappling with their fears and uncertainties. Hannah's father took a deep breath, his hands still clenched into fists as he struggled to maintain his composure. "Discreet?" he spat, his voice a mix of anger and disbelief. "You think you can just intimidate us into silence? After everything you've done, you think a few threats will make us back down?" Dr. Roberts' expression remained unfazed, though a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "This is not a threat, Mr. Mitchell. It's a practical consideration. You're treading on dangerous ground. I have resources, connections, and influence that could make things very difficult for you if you continue down this path." Sandra, her voice shaking but resolute, stepped closer to her husband. "We're not afraid of you," she said firmly. "We know what you've done, and we're not going to let you get away with it. You've hurt too many people already." Dr. Roberts' eyes narrowed, the coldness in them deepening. "You're making a grave mistake," he said quietly. "I suggest you reconsider. There are ways to resolve this without causing further harm to yourselves or others." Hannah, though terrified, felt a surge of bravery. She moved closer to her father, her eyes meeting Dr. Roberts's with a defiant gaze. "You don't get to decide what's best for us," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor of fear. "We're fighting for what's right, and we're not backing down." Dr. Roberts's gaze shifted to Hannah, and for a moment, a flicker of something, perhaps respect or surprise, crossed his face. "Very well," he said, his tone icy. "If you're determined to proceed, then so be it. But don't say I didn't warn you." With that, he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving the family standing in the doorway, their emotions a turbulent mix of relief and trepidation. As the door closed behind him, the silence in the house was deafening. Hannah's father exhaled slowly, his face pale but determined. "We need to stay strong," he said, his voice low. "We knew this wouldn't be easy, but we can't let him intimidate us." Sandra nodded, her eyes filled with tears but also a fierce resolve. "We'll see this through," she said. "We have to." In the days that followed, the family continued their work, driven by a renewed sense of purpose. They contacted the legal experts provided by the nurse, gathering and organizing the evidence they had collected. The process was painstaking and fraught with obstacles, but they were undeterred. The whispers and rumors about their fight against Dr. Roberts spread, and the family faced increasing scrutiny from their community. Hannah, still navigating the challenges of her pregnancy, found solace in the support of her parents and a few loyal friends. Despite the judgmental stares and harsh comments, she remained steadfast in her resolve. One evening, as they worked late into the night, Sandra looked up from her notes and said, "We've made a lot of progress, but we're still facing many hurdles. We need to prepare ourselves for a long fight." If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 3 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Hannah's father nodded, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "We've come this far and we're not turning back now," he said. "We need to stay focused and keep pushing forward." The family's determination was put to the test as they prepared for the next steps in their battle. They faced legal challenges, resistance from powerful allies of Dr. Roberts, and the constant strain of public scrutiny. But with each challenge, their resolve grew stronger. Finally, the day arrived when they could present their case. The courtroom was filled with tension as the family, along with their legal team, prepared to face Dr. Roberts and his powerful defense. The stakes were incredibly high, but the family remained united in their quest for justice. As the trial unfolded, the evidence they had gathered was presented, revealing the extent of Dr. Roberts's unethical practices. Witnesses came forward, their testimonies painting a harrowing picture of the damage he had caused. The courtroom buzzed with the gravity of the revelations, and the public began to take notice. Hannah, sitting with her parents in the courtroom, felt a mixture of anxiety and relief as the trial progressed. Each day brought new revelations and challenges, but also a glimmer of hope. The courtroom became a battleground where their quest for justice clashed with Dr. Roberts's formidable defense team. The testimony of the nurse who had first reached out to them was a crucial turning point. Her detailed account of the unethical practices and the emotional and physical toll they had taken on patients added a powerful voice to their case. Her courage in speaking out, despite her fear of retaliation, resonated deeply with the court and the public. Hannah's testimony was another pivotal moment. Despite the emotional strain, she spoke with clarity and strength about her experience and the impact Dr. Roberts's actions had on her life. Her bravery in sharing her story, despite the ongoing stigma and judgment, provided a human face to the allegations and helped to underscore the severity of the situation. As the trial progressed, the defense team employed every tactic they could to discredit the family's case. They questioned the credibility of witnesses, attempted to disprove the evidence, and painted Dr. Roberts as a misunderstood figure rather than a perpetrator of serious misconduct. The courtroom became a tense arena of legal maneuvering and emotional strain, but the family remained resolute. Outside the courtroom, the media coverage intensified. The public's interest in the case grew, and the family found themselves at the center of a media storm. Reports and interviews highlighted their struggle and the broader implications of the case, bringing to light the systemic issues within the healthcare system that allowed Dr. Roberts's behavior to go unchecked for so long. Amid the legal battles and public scrutiny, the family leaned on each other for support. Sandra and Hannah's father worked tirelessly to manage the logistics of the case while also providing emotional support for Hannah. They attended every court session, prepared statements, and met with their legal team to strategize their next moves. Hannah, grappling with the challenges of her pregnancy and the emotional toll of the trial, found strength in the support of her parents and a few close friends. The anticipation of becoming a mother and the desire to ensure a safer future for others fueled her determination to see the case through to the end. As the trial neared its conclusion, the evidence and testimonies presented painted a damning picture of Dr. Roberts's actions. The courtroom was filled with a palpable sense of anticipation as closing arguments were made and the jury began its deliberations. The verdict came down on a crisp autumn morning. The courtroom was packed with spectators, reporters, and legal professionals, all waiting to hear the outcome. When the jury's decision was announced, a wave of emotion swept over the family. The verdict was a significant victory. Dr. Roberts was found guilty of multiple counts of malpractice and unethical behavior. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of relief and subdued celebration as the judge read the sentence, which included substantial penalties and a permanent revocation of Dr. Roberts's medical license. Hannah's family embraced each other, their tears a mixture of relief, joy, and exhaustion. They had fought a long and arduous battle, and though the road ahead would still be filled with challenges, This moment marked a significant step towards justice. The trial not only exposed the wrongdoing of one individual, but also sparked a broader conversation about accountability and ethics within the healthcare system. Reforms and increased scrutiny followed, driven in part by the courageous stand of Hannah and her family. As they left the courthouse, the family felt a profound sense of accomplishment and hope. Their fight was far from over, but they had proven that courage and determination could bring about change. Hannah, despite the ongoing struggles of her pregnancy and the challenges of moving forward, felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was determined to focus on her future and the new life she was about to bring into the world, with the knowledge that they had made a difference and paved the way for a safer, more ethical healthcare environment. Her father's face contorted with a mix of guilt and frustration as he took in her words. The anguish in his eyes was palpable, a reflection of the torment he felt for not being able to shield his daughter from such a harrowing ordeal. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his grip tender but firm. "No, Hannah," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I should have done more. I should have seen the warning signs and done something sooner. I've always tried to protect you, but I failed in the most crucial moment." Hannah squeezed his hand reassuringly. "You've always done everything you could for me. This isn't your fault. It's Dr. Roberts who is to blame. We're fighting him now, and that's what matters." Her father nodded, though the weight of his remorse was evident in his posture. He sat back, leaning against the couch, his eyes distant as he stared at the flickering light of the lamp. The room was enveloped in a heavy silence, the kind that spoke of shared grief and unspoken fears. "I know," he said finally, his voice a whisper, "but I still can't shake the feeling that I should have done anything to prevent this." Hannah's heart ached for her father, seeing him so torn apart by the situation. She gently placed her other hand on his, drawing closer to him. "We can't change the past," she said softly. "What we can do is make sure that this doesn't happen to anyone else. We're standing up to him and we're not backing down. You've been my rock through all of this, and now I need you to keep being strong for me." Her father's eyes met hers, and he saw the resolve and courage in her gaze. It was a reminder of why they were fighting so hard, to hold Dr. Roberts accountable and to prevent others from suffering as they had. The anger and fear he felt were still there, but they were tempered by a renewed sense of purpose. "You're right," he said, nodding slowly. "We have to keep fighting. For you, for everyone who's been hurt by him. We've come this far, and we're not stopping now." The conversation left them both exhausted but somehow lighter. There was a sense of catharsis in acknowledging their feelings and reaffirming their commitment to seeking justice. They shared a quiet moment of mutual support before Hannah's father stood, pulling her into a comforting embrace. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice muffled as he hugged her tightly. "I'm proud of how strong you've been through all this." Hannah hugged him back, tears mingling with a smile of gratitude. "And I'm proud of you, Dad, for standing up for me, for us. We're in this together." As they separated, the room felt a little less heavy, and the burden of their fear and anger slightly eased. They knew the fight ahead would be long and arduous, but they also knew they had each other. The support they found in their family bond was a beacon of hope in their dark journey. The next morning, they resumed their preparations with renewed vigor. They had faced Dr. Roberts and his threats, and their resolve had only hardened. With each step, they gathered more evidence, sought more testimonies, and built a stronger case against him. The family's unity and determination became their greatest strengths, guiding them through the legal battles and the ongoing struggle for justice. In the weeks that followed, as the trial continued and their fight against Dr. Roberts intensified, the family remained steadfast. They supported one another through the highs and lows, drawing strength from their shared commitment to bringing the truth to light. Despite the obstacles, they were driven by a shared goal: to ensure that Dr. Roberts could never again inflict harm on another person and to reclaim their lives from the shadow he had cast over them. The road ahead was still fraught with challenges, but with each step, they felt more confident in their ability to overcome them. Their fight for justice was far from over, but they faced it with unwavering determination, knowing that their courage and unity were their greatest allies. The courtroom was a somber battlefield, the weight of every testimony adding layers to the already heavy atmosphere. Hannah and her family sat quietly, their emotions a complex mixture of hope and anxiety. The testimonies of the nurses were particularly heart-wrenching. They spoke of witnessing procedures gone wrong, of patients suffering in silence, and of the growing dread they felt every day as Dr. Roberts' disregard for their well-being became increasingly apparent. One nurse, her voice cracking under the strain of recounting her experiences, described the moment she realized the gravity of the situation. She spoke of a particularly harrowing incident where a patient, after a seemingly routine procedure, had experienced severe complications that could have been prevented if Dr. Roberts had followed standard protocols. Her eyes filled with tears as she recalled the anguish of the patient and the helplessness she felt. Another nurse described the atmosphere in the clinic, a place where fear was palpable and dissent was met with intimidation. She shared how Dr. Roberts had silenced those who tried to raise concerns, how he manipulated the system to keep his actions hidden, and how the few who dared to speak up were met with threats and hostility. The courtroom was silent as each nurse's story unfolded, their bravery shining through despite their evident fear. The defense tried to discredit their testimonies, but the weight of their words and the emotional impact they had on the courtroom were undeniable. Dr. Roberts' once unshakable demeanor began to crack, his confident facade crumbling as the evidence mounted against him. Hannah watched as Dr. Roberts' arrogance faded into desperation. His attempts to maintain control seemed increasingly futile as the testimonies painted a vivid picture of his malevolence. Every accusation, every detail revealed, seemed to strip away another layer of the false respectability he had built for himself. In the midst of this, Hannah's family remained a constant source of support for each other. They had become a united front, their bond strengthened by the ordeal they were facing together. Each day in court was a test of their resilience, but they found solace in their shared resolve. The process was long and draining, but the sense of justice being served fueled their determination. The trial continued, and with each passing day, the prosecution's case grew stronger. Witness after witness provided crucial pieces of the puzzle, and the cumulative effect was devastating. Dr. Roberts' defense struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence, and his once confident posture became increasingly defensive. Hannah found herself caught between a profound sense of vindication and the emotional toll of reliving the trauma. Yet, as the days wore on, she felt a growing sense of closure. The voices that had been silent for so long were now being heard, and the injustices they had endured were being acknowledged. The courtroom drama was intense, but it was also a testament to the strength and perseverance of those who had fought to bring Dr. Roberts to justice. The turning point came when a particularly compelling piece of evidence was introduced, a collection of records and documents that clearly illustrated Dr. Roberts' negligence and malicious intent. The court watched in stunned silence as the evidence was laid bare, a final blow to the defense's attempts to salvage Dr. Roberts' reputation. As the trial drew to a close, the verdict was eagerly anticipated. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, the culmination of months of legal battles and emotional turmoil. When the verdict was finally read, guilty on all charges, the courtroom erupted in a mix of relief and subdued celebration. For Hannah and her family, it was a moment of justice and vindication, a confirmation that their fight had not been in vain. Dr. Roberts was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, his once imposing figure now reduced to a shadow of its former self. The sentence was a stark reminder of the consequences of his actions and a reassurance that justice had been served. As the courtroom emptied, Hannah and her family stood together, a sense of relief and accomplishment washing over them. They knew that the road to healing would be long and difficult, but they also knew that they had faced their fears and emerged victorious. Their journey had been fraught with challenges, but their unwavering support for one another had carried them through. In the end, their story was one of resilience and hope, a testament to the strength of family and the power of standing up against injustice. As they left the courtroom, they did so with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to begin the next chapter of their lives with the knowledge that they had made a difference. The courtroom was a landscape of raw emotions, each testimony like a piercing arrow aimed at the heart of the injustice that had unfolded. As the nurse with the tired eyes recounted the story of Sarah, a heavy silence settled over the room. Her words, laced with guilt and sorrow, painted a harrowing picture of Dr. Roberts's unyielding cruelty. "She came in for a routine procedure," the nurse said, her voice breaking. "But it turned into a nightmare. The babies didn't survive, and neither did she. It was like he didn't even see her. Just another failed experiment." The gallery gasped collectively, and even the stern judge seemed momentarily affected by the gravity of the testimony. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 4 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. The younger nurse's account added another layer to the unfolding horror. She spoke of a man who had come seeking hope and instead found himself trapped in Dr. Roberts's twisted machinations. "He died," she whispered, her voice almost lost in the stillness of the courtroom. "I saw the fear in his eyes, the realization of what was happening, and I could do nothing. I wanted to help him, but I was paralyzed with fear. He looked at me, pleading, and then he was gone." The chilling impact of her words settled like a pall over the room, as the audience absorbed the full extent of Dr. Roberts's depravity. When Hannah took the stand, the atmosphere shifted again. Her hands trembled slightly, but her gaze was unwavering as she faced Dr. Roberts. Her strength was palpable, a stark contrast to the fear that had once dominated her life. "He took something from me," she began, her voice steady, though a trace of emotion lingered. "He stole my innocence, my future, but he didn't break me. I'm standing here today because I refused to let him win." As she recounted her ordeal, each word she spoke seemed to resonate with a powerful defiance. Dr. Roberts, observing her with an unsettling detachment, seemed almost intrigued by her resilience. His lack of remorse was a glaring testament to his moral bankruptcy. The prosecution's case was meticulously crafted, with experts delving into Dr. Roberts's psyche. They described him as a man who had elevated his is above human life, someone who had lost all sense of empathy and morality. He saw himself as a pioneer, one expert testified. He thought he was above the constraints of ethics, believing that the ends justified the means. In truth, he was a delusional maniac, driven by a desire for control and power. The defense's attempts to paint Dr. Roberts as a misunderstood visionary fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence. The testimonies and the undeniable facts made it clear that his intentions were not noble, but deeply sinister. As the trial drew to a close, the verdict was met with palpable anticipation. The jury, having seen through the smokescreens of the defense, delivered their decision without hesitation. Guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom, a definitive end to Dr. Roberts's reign of terror. Though his expression remained largely unchanged, a subtle tension in his posture suggested that the reality of his situation was beginning to penetrate his self-assured facade. The judge's sentencing was severe, reflecting the gravity of Dr. Roberts's crimes. He was stripped of his medical license, his assets were seized, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he was led away in handcuffs, the gallery erupted into a cacophony of relief and anger. The community, once shaken to its core, had found a measure of justice. The man who had betrayed their trust and inflicted untold suffering was finally being held accountable. For Hannah and her family, the courtroom experience was a mixture of closure and continued struggle. The journey was far from over, but as they watched Dr. Roberts being taken away, they felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Their fight had been arduous, but their collective strength had paved the way for justice. They knew that healing would take time, but the resolve to face the future together gave them hope. The courtroom's silence, punctuated by the echoes of the day's proceedings, was a testament to their resilience and their unwavering commitment to truth and justice. The news of Dr. Roberts's downfall rippled across the nation, transforming him from a once-respected physician into a grim symbol of corruption and abuse of power. Headlines blared with the shocking details of his crimes, a stark reminder of how trust and authority could be exploited in the most egregious ways. As the media frenzy continued, Hannah and her parents found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of public attention. Yet, amidst the tumult, there was a profound sense of relief and quiet triumph. They had faced the darkest chapter of their lives and emerged victorious, but the path to healing was far from straightforward. Outside the courthouse, the support from strangers was both comforting and overwhelming. People approached them with heartfelt condolences and encouragement, sharing their own stories of suffering and resilience. It was as though the weight of their struggle had opened a floodgate, allowing others to step forward and confront their demons. Hannah found solace in this collective act of courage, knowing that she was not alone and that the truth was finally being heard. The road to recovery was long, but there was a glimmer of hope in the shared determination to rebuild lives and restore faith. In the months following the trial, Hannah experienced a profound transformation. The pain of the past, while never fully erased, began to coexist with a burgeoning sense of hope and renewal. The birth of Jonah marked a pivotal moment in her journey. The hospital room, filled with the soft cries of her newborn son, was a sanctuary of hope and a testament to her strength. Holding Jonah, Hannah felt a surge of love so powerful that it eclipsed the shadows of her past. Each tiny hand grasp and every fleeting smile from Jonah was a reminder of the life she was committed to protecting and nurturing. As Jonah grew, his presence illuminated the darkest corners of Hannah's life. His wide, curious eyes and infectious laughter became the touchstones of her daily existence, grounding her in a reality far removed from the trauma she had endured. Jonah's milestones, his first smile, his tentative steps, and his first words were not just personal triumphs but also symbols of Hannah's resilience and hope for a brighter future. Despite the joy, the challenges of single motherhood were immense. The sleepless nights, the constant worry over providing for Jonah's future, and the unrelenting pace of daily life weighed heavily on her shoulders. Yet, every glance at her son reminded Hannah of her resolve and determination to persevere. Determined to secure a stable future for Jonah, Hannah reignited dreams she had once shelved. She enrolled in online classes, burning the midnight oil after Jonah had fallen asleep. The workload was daunting, but her commitment to creating a better life for her son fueled her perseverance. Each completed assignment was a step towards a more secure and fulfilling future, not just for herself but for Jonah as well. Her parents, too, were integral to this new chapter. The trials they had faced had initially strained their relationship, but Jonah's arrival was a balm to their wounds. They embraced their new role as grandparents with a fervent dedication, eager to support Hannah and cherish their grandson. The once tense atmosphere in their home gradually softened, giving way to a renewed sense of unity and shared purpose. They worked together to build a nurturing environment for Jonah, each day reinforcing their commitment to family and healing. In the end, Hannah's journey was one of profound transformation. The scars of the past were a part of her, but they were no longer the sole definition of her existence. Jonah's presence was a beacon of hope, guiding her through the complexities of recovery and inspiring her to pursue her aspirations with renewed vigor. The road ahead remained fraught with challenges, but Hannah faced it with fierce determination and an unwavering belief in the possibility of a better future. His remorse defines her path forward. The letter only served as a reminder of the darkness she had left behind, and she resolved not to let it invade her newfound peace. Hannah's decision to move had been motivated by the desire to escape the constant reminders of her past and to offer Jonah a fresh start. The small town they had relocated to was quiet and unassuming, a perfect backdrop for their new beginning. Every day in their new home felt like a small victory, a testament to their resilience and a step further from the shadows of their previous life. Jonah's second birthday approached with the promise of celebration and hope. Hannah was eager to create happy memories for him, free from the fears and struggles that had once dominated their lives. The community in their new town welcomed them with open arms, and Hannah began to build new friendships and connections. The simplicity and tranquility of their new surroundings brought a sense of calm she had longed for. She enrolled Jonah in a local playgroup, where he quickly made friends, and she found herself forming bonds with other parents and neighbors. As the months passed, the letter from Dr. Roberts became a distant memory, something she had locked away to prevent it from disturbing the peace she had worked so hard to achieve. Hannah focused on her job, her studies, and, most importantly, on being the best mother she could be. The challenges of balancing work and parenting were significant, but she approached them with a sense of purpose and determination. Each milestone Jonah reached, each small victory in her personal and professional life, was a testament to the strength she had found within herself. The past no longer held the same power over her. Hannah was determined to live a life filled with hope and possibility, and her commitment to her new beginning was unwavering. Jonah's laughter, his growth, and his joy became the focal points of her life, a constant reminder of what she had fought for and what she continued to strive toward. The scars of her past were still there, but they no longer defined her. She had forged a new path, one filled with love, stability, and the promise of a brighter future. In their new home, surrounded by the warmth of their new community and the love of her son, Hannah found a profound sense of peace and fulfillment. The journey had been long and fraught with difficulties, but she had emerged stronger and more resolute than ever. The future stretched out before them, and though it was uncertain, it was theirs to shape and cherish. As Jonah grew and thrived in their new life, so too did Hannah's spirit, continually healing and evolving with each passing day. Hannah's journey is indeed a powerful testament to human resilience and the transformative power of hope and love. Her story captures the essence of overcoming unimaginable adversity and finding the strength to build a life of fulfillment and happiness despite the shadows of her past. From the depths of despair, where she faced not just physical but emotional and psychological trauma, Hannah emerged not just as a survivor but as a beacon of strength for her son and herself. Her choice to sever ties with her past and focus on building a new life for Jonah was both courageous and profound. It highlights an essential truth. While we cannot change our past, we hold the power to shape our future through our choices and actions. The quiet beauty of their new life in the small town, the warmth of a new community, and the supportive love of a partner who embraced both Hannah and Jonah are emblematic of the healing that comes with moving forward. Her achievements, completing her degree, securing a stable job, and creating a nurturing environment for her son, are milestones that reflect not just personal growth but an unwavering commitment to building a better future. The introduction of a kind, understanding partner who loved Jonah as his own signifies not only new beginnings, but also the ability to trust and open her heart again. This new chapter in her life symbolizes the culmination of her journey from fear to fulfillment, showcasing that true healing often involves embracing new opportunities and relationships that align with one's newfound strength and hope. In the end, Hannah's story serves as a profound reminder that healing is not about erasing the past, but about embracing our capacity for growth, love, and renewal. Her transformation is a testament to the strength of the human spirit, the importance of moving forward, and the incredible power of love and resilience in shaping a brighter, more hopeful future. As we come to the end of Hannah's incredible journey, we are reminded of the immense strength and resilience that can emerge from the darkest of circumstances. Her story has taken us from profound suffering to the light of hope and renewal, illustrating how our past does not have to define our future. It's a powerful testament to the human spirit and the transformative power of love and courage. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What lessons have you taken away from Hannah's journey? How do you plan to apply these insights to your own life? Please share one key takeaway or practice you will bring into your life in the comments below. Your reflections can inspire and support others who may be on their path to healing and growth. If you liked this video and found Hannah's story meaningful, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring content. Your support helps us continue to create and share stories that uplift and empower. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.